The death toll from the coronavirus has now hit over 3,200 people, with more than 100,000 infected around the world. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the World Health Organization is now reporting that over 100 countries are now infected with COVID-19. Italy alone has quarantined millions upon millions of people.
Yes, and it seems how each week when you and I speak, these numbers keep rising. And it looks like we're still climbing towards the climax of this virus. And again, the mystery surrounding this virus, more people die from the flu, and that's a valid statistic. And people wonder, is the hype, is it justified? Should we be quarantining ourselves if we've been in contact with people who have this virus? Should we be wearing masks and gloves when we go to the supermarket, or do our mundane tasks? Should we refrain from going into crowded places or enclosed places like concerts and games and things like that? Well, the answer is that we don't know enough about this virus. It's so new. It's uncharted territory. And because these numbers keep rising the way that they are, because you see places in Italy, the entire cities shut down, in Wuhan, China, of course, where this originated, shutting down. When you see these cases rising in more states in the United States, getting the virus and finding cases of the virus, we've said this before, for as long as airplanes are flying and cruise ships are docking, there will be a spread of this virus from place to place. And that's the unfortunate thing. Until we get a grip on what is truly going on, the only way to stop this is to prevent that contact. And are we going to instate martial law everywhere and really not leave our homes? Short of that, it might be a good thing to kind of curb our activities for a while so that we don't see these numbers continue to spike the way that they have been.
Here in Canada, we've had our first coronavirus death. It was a person living in British Columbia. A tourist in Egypt became the first confirmed virus death in Africa. And Argentina confirms its first coronavirus death in Latin America. It's not going away anytime soon. And coronavirus infections in the United States have now topped 500.
Yes, we've had cases here where I live in Los Angeles. There's cases in New York City, people traveling all over the place. Every morning when I do the top 10 for the foreign desk, the top 10 email, the first few sections are reserved for new corona stories. And every morning, sure enough, there are new places to find new cases of the virus. And again, it's not going away anytime soon. And it looks like we're still climbing towards what will be the peak of this virus. And until we have some sort of vaccine, which we know is being worked on in Israel and other places, but it seems as though Israel is the closest to coming up with a vaccine that might be effective. Until then, the CDC is only encouraging people to wash their hands, wash their hands, wash their hands, to stay within 6 feet of people who have the virus. And if you know that you have it, to stay away from others, to self-quarantine. The issue here is that the virus has a latency period of anywhere from 2 to 14 days. It's those cases where it's 14 days that you see the individual carry on with their normal life, go to the office, go to, school drop off, hang around their family and friends, and go to the supermarket and, again, do their mundane tasks where they are coming into contact with dozens and dozens and dozens of people. That's where we see this mystery virus as it's kind of proven itself to be. That's where we're seeing a difficulty and a challenge in really pinning it down.
Lisa, the virus has impacted world travel. I mean, the Canadian government is advising against going on cruise ships. Greece has banned school field trips and fans at sporting events. Here in North America, the NHL no longer allows journalists into the locker rooms to speak with the players before or after games. And speaking of which, isn't the NBA even considering banning fans from going to the arenas? And LeBron James of the Lakers, where you are in LA, says, I'm not going to play if the fans are coming out.
That's too bad for season ticket holders, isn't it, Hal?
Yeah.
This might sound like insanity. A basketball game without fans, not going into the locker room to get the reaction of the hockey players after a game, not going to parties and weddings and things like that. And it might be insanity, but people would rather err and be more cautious than not. Again, as because we see these numbers rising the way that they have, it's better to be cautious than not, and particularly for the demographics that are most vulnerable, those who are immunocompromised and don't have the ability to fight off something of this nature, and those who are older have respiratory challenges already. Otherwise, it could be like a normal flu or a respiratory infection, as many of us have had before and have been able to fight it off. This will be also a bargain dealer's dilemma. Everywhere is offering these dirt cheap cruises and airline tickets and hotels because the travel industry has obviously taken a hit. A lot of people canceling their trips and refusing to leave or go to even the airport. I traveled to Washington last week. I wore a mask at the airport. Many people were wearing masks and gloves and really being extremely cautious. And I think last week we were 1 week less crazed about this as we are this week. We're even, I think more cautious now than we've ever been before. But it's going to be extremely challenging to really curb everyone's activities. But I think, families have to decide for themselves if they prioritize the health of themselves and their family members, then they need to curb their activities. And unfortunately, that includes all these sporting activities as well.
A story out of Jerusalem says Iran's regime is pushing anti-Semitic conspiracies about the coronavirus. Tell me more about that.
Surprise, 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 right? Every time that the Iran regime has had a chance to spread propaganda where it takes a situation and blames it on one of their other agendas, they do so. So right now, the coronavirus is either because of the U.S. and the sanctions, that's why the people are dying because of the sanctions that the U.S. put on them, and also because this is in Israel or a Zionist virus that has been spread to Iran and other places to kill Muslim people. That's the conspiracy that they are now spreading. Well, the question begs, and why are there people in Israel who have it, and why are Israelis dealing with the same dilemma that the rest of us are dealing with? But it's no surprise that the Iran regime has something to say. Just like tsunamis and earthquakes are because of gay people or women wearing sexy lingerie, they find a way to kind of, again, push their own narrative forward by the propaganda against the enemies, and in this case being the West, the United States, Israel, etc.
There are reports from the South Korean military, Lisa, that North Korea has fired at least 3 unidentified projectiles off of its east coast earlier this week. Nuclear talks between Pyongyang and Washington have remained stalled since the second summit between Kim and U.S. President Trump.
Yeah, what's North Korea, right? Who's following that story? It's true that there has not been any movement on the warming of ties that we were kind of excited for. And I say excited because it was a historic moment where Donald Trump was able to bring in Kim Jong-un, a rogue dictator who remains a rogue dictator. Obviously, North Korea, the news that comes out of there daily is, missile tests and more flexing of the muscles and more of the saber rattling that we've seen come out of North Korea. Business as usual, we would say. But what happened to that warming of ties? Will there be a third meeting between the two? Donald Trump has hinted at the fact that they remain kind of like friends, but kind of a little icy around the edges because of issues that they cannot compromise on. But we know that the precondition for the United States has always been to denuclearize, and for Kim Jong-un, it has always been to remain in power, to kind of have that egotistical dictator, statues everywhere of himself kind of leadership. He wants to maintain that role, and he can, but we'll see if there will be a third meeting and if there will be a full kind of, I don't want to call it a negotiation because there's nothing that they're fully trying to negotiate. It's only to bring North Korea to normalize North Korea into the world economy, to the world community, and to kind of disarm them literally and figuratively from their nuclear position.
It appears as though the Taliban is acting up once again. The U.S. has intel that the Taliban does not intend to abide by terms of its peace deal.
surprise, surprise, we're trying to negotiate with terrorists and to entrust them with the future of Afghanistan, and it's not working. Well, the Taliban have proven themselves to be terrorists. They actually are terrorists. And why the US and those in charge of this deal would think otherwise and would think that they would be able to future build for the people of Afghanistan is besides me. But the dilemma that the United States and our military face at the moment is that we want to pull out of Afghanistan. It is an endless war. We're losing young men and women and treasure there that we don't need to be losing. And at the same time, there doesn't seem to be any end in sight or any solution or resolution in sight for the future of Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been in perpetual turmoil for decades, and probably for decades to come. The only solution would be for them to self-build, to construct a society that would fit the needs and wants of the Afghan people. And of course, the only group that has the influence there to do so is the Taliban. But again, they are terrorists. And it kind of it goes to the point of what the Arab Spring was in many cases all around the Middle East. Although Afghanistan is not an Arab nation, I only kind of cluster them together to say, you know, it's very difficult to remove leadership and to replace it with something that fits the needs of the people going forward. What happens is we create a political vacuum and swoops in that terror organization. It could be ISIS, it could be Al-Qaeda, it could be the Muslim Brotherhood, and in this case, it is the Taliban. And the US has tried ceasefires, it has tried negotiations, it has tried to bring the Taliban to the table, and sometimes they have complied and sometimes they have not. But when we hear about these reports of terror attacks daily and in civilian areas, attacking civilians, women, children, schools, ice cream shops, it's really heartbreaking to see that we've put so much into Afghanistan and we cannot we cannot see a future in sight that will, you know, answer the needs of the people there.
Many countries around the world recently celebrated International Women's Day, including where you are in the United States and you're in Canada, but not so much in Afghanistan, where the Taliban still have a big stronghold. No big surprise, I guess. The Taliban said, "Oh, we're not interested in that."
Right. Of course not, because again, they're a terror organization with a very patriarchal Sharia law tenets. That's exactly what we were fearful of. Again, when you have this rise, again, I call it the Arab Spring because that's what it was collectively called, but this coming of age for the Middle East, which included Iran and Afghanistan, which are not Arab nations, that brought to light the plight of the human rights crises and the plight of so many marginalized groups, be it, you know, young writers and poets and women and children, dancers, and, you know, those who are homosexuals, or those who are journalists who were arrested for posting something on Facebook. So it really brought to light a lot of these fringe groups that never had the platform before. And for women, they had this moment of hope where things are going to change for the better. And when you have a group like the Taliban coming in, they know that that is not true. And if anything, it's going to get even worse for them as a group. So when we do celebrate National Women's Day in this country, in the West, in free places, we have to take a moment and to recognize places where women are not free. And I say this, you know, to groups that are, you know, so liberal and so, you know, patting themselves on the back for really fighting for that, social justice and such, and they don't think about these other women. And if they did, they would really remember them and give them a platform so that we could be the voices for the women who don't have the platform or the opportunity to have their voices heard.
Lisa, the U.S. military confirmed that a drone took out one of Al-Shabaab's top leaders last month. It's believed that Bashir Mohammed Mahmoud was killed in a U.S. airstrike on February 22nd.
Yes, this is big news. I know we're not really focused on anything but Corona these days, but this is very big news, and we're not focused on the African continent at the very least. So again, we follow this at the Foreign Desk. This is something that's very important because it is the growth of a major terror organization, particularly in the African continent. While everyone's looking away and focused, whether it's on Corona, and then we do focus on foreign policy, it's either, you know, the Middle East or China or North Korea. No one's thinking about what's going on in the African continent, where these terror organizations are, you know, gaining influence, raping women, taking young girls from their families and selling them off as child brides. And the list of violations goes on and on and on. So, when you take out a major commander of the AlShabaab group, this is great news. And great news because the U.S. is fixated on diminishing the presence of terrorism in Africa, not allowing groups like, the Chinese or the Russians to get in there and take advantage. And when you do take advantage, you create, again, these political vacuums where groups like AlShabaab do gain that momentum. So again, this is great news and somewhere where we should be putting more of our attention.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.